Africa is as divided as it was at the beginning of the struggle for independence, despite the fact the Organization of African Unity was created to unify us, and despite the fact that we changed our name in the year 2002 to African Union, despite the fact that we have many African institutions, despite the fact that we have ECOWAS and SADC and the Sahelian and other regional organizations, we are in a state of disunity. As I talk about African unity, China refuses to get out of my mind. And I hope I'm wrong. But the Chinese know that we are disunited. And they know that in our disunited state we can be manipulated. And they are in the process of manipulating us. So today, there is not a single African country in which the Chinese have not built a stadium. They think we love stadia. There is not a single African country in which they are not building some roads. The Chinese are capable of delivering 3 types of qualities of the things they do. Quality number 1, they take to the United States of America and Europe. Quality number 2, they take to their fellow Asian countries, including India. Quality number 3, which is at the very bottom, they dump in Africa, and the Africans consume them gleefully. And it's because of our disunity, we are incapable of speaking with one voice. You know, many times when I look at Ghana, the Ghanaian president, whom I respect, is invited to Beijing to negotiate with Beijing, as indeed the Kenyan president would be, and the Burundi president, to negotiate with Beijing on a bilateral basis. And when they invite African leaders, they humor them, complete with guards of honor and 21 gun salutes, so that they think that they are equal. But the Ghanaian economy's GDP is possibly 1/3 of the GDP of the city of Beijing. The Burundian economy is only $2 billion United States dollars, which is the same amount that an American professional boxer earns in 1 year. The economy of Benin is smaller than Coca-Cola's advertising budget for 1 year. In other words, African economies are Mickey Mouse economies which cannot compete. And because we are disunited, we are incapable of moving as one unit. The European Union wants to have what they call bilateral negotiations with Benin. The European Union's combined economy, perhaps the largest market in the world today, is something in the neighborhood of 14 trillion United States dollars if you combine the European Union economy, and you have bilateral negotiations with Benin. That is smaller than the turnover of Standard Chartered Bank. In other words, the president of Standard Chartered Bank could very well be the one negotiating with the president of Benin, if we were to be realistic. But that is because we are disunited. And I'm submitting to us that the only antidote to that is our unity. I know, as I said yesterday, that there are already efforts to move Africa in the direction of unity at the economic front, but the suspicions in Africa are too great. The African politician is perhaps, with due respect to them, Africa's curse. The day the African politician realizes that the occupation of political office and political space is one of servant leadership, that is the day Africa will begin to move in the right direction. The day the African politician realizes that the occupation of public space and public office is an honor and a privilege, that is the day Africa begins to move in the right direction. The day the African politician recognizes that the occupation of office is not one for the privatization of public wealth, that is the day Africa will begin to move in the right direction. The day the African politician recognizes that they do not have the monopoly of wisdom, that is the day that Africa will begin to move in the right direction. The day the African politician realizes that longevity in office is not the solution to African problems, that is the day Africa begins to realize their potential. The day that the African politician begins to remember that the electoral vote is a charge for them to deliver on health, on agriculture and education, that is the day Africa will begin to know her place in the world. The day the African politician is liberated from the chains of greed, that is the day that Africa will realize her potential. And I say all that because it is not lost on me that one of the reasons why Africa cannot unite is because we have become so used as politicians in Africa to our little countries where we are treated like demigods. And because we too, we who are the led, we have treated our leaders as demigods for too long, and they now are conditioned to believe that they are gods. You know, respecting leaders is a good thing, because that is what is right. Once you have given people the privilege to serve you, you give them respect. But respect must be earned. Many times in my own country, in Kenya, I see the individuals, some of the individuals that we elect into public office, some are fine, but some are not. In fact, most are not. And in my rural village, they elect some semi-illiterate individual who everybody knows is semi-illiterate, and everybody knows he is not wise. But the day after his election, when he attends a forum such as this, those who invite him to speak will say, let so-and-so whom we elected yesterday share his wisdom with us. And I want to assure you that there is no magic in the ballot box. If you are a dunderhead, the mere fact that you have been elected does not convert you into anything. You just remain an elected dunderhead. And Africa has no shortage of dunderheads who are leading her in the wrong direction. The direction of disunity. I am telling us, as I remember the Osagie for Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, that now, as you turn in your grave, if you had been alive, you'd possibly be 107 years today. But your people, some of them, in their lack of wisdom, chose to remove you from power. I apologize on their behalf. They gave you only a few years to be present in this world. And during those few years that you are present in this world, you shook not only Ghana, but Africa so very fundamentally that although your mortal remains were interred, your spirit is alive and well. And it's that spirit that occupies our minds and hearts today as we remind ourselves that the only way in which Africa will realize our potential is through the path of unity. I know as you lie in your grave, great Osagyefo, there is a sense in which, in a manner so completely invisible to us, you are turning uncomfortably and weeping uncontrollably, because your continent is bleeding. It is bleeding in every corner. In our heart, in the Congo, she bleeds. That country that is so rich is yet the poorest nation in Africa. But it does not stop bleeding only in the Congo. It also bleeds in our Horn in Somalia. That country, which could be very rich, is only famous for the wrong things. Men killing men for no reason. But it doesn't stop bleeding there. It is also bleeding in our armpit, in Equatorial Guinea, that country that God gave so much oil. That oil was long captured by one family, and they are using it for their benefit to the detriment of their people. And it doesn't stop bleeding there. In Central African Republic and in Libya and in Mauritania and in Mali, your continent is torn asunder. And we who have gathered here today are asking ourselves the fundamental question: what must we do to save Africa? And that is why today, when we are looking at Africa and when we are remembering you on that 24th day of May in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, we cannot help but remember how animated you are. We cannot help but remember that what you saw 50 years ago is turning out to be as evergreen as when you spoke them. You told us then that our unity was going to be our salvation from other civilization. Today, Africa is said to be rising, but the question we are asking, for whom is Africa rising? Today, the minerals in our belly are being exploited, Osagyefo. The uranium in Niger is being taken away from France to France. The manganese in Ghana, in your own country, is being taken away. Even the cocoa, which you must have consumed as a young man, is taken away in the same manner that God made it to be converted into something in Switzerland. Your people have not learned to add value to it. They have an apology for a factory in Takoradi, but it does very little, Osagyefo. In other words, there is a lot to be done. We can hear you telling us that we need to have free movement of goods and services in this continent. I can now inform you that when they met on the 27th day of July in Kigali, Rwanda, they created a passport. But that passport is only known to the president. The people of Africa have no idea what it is. But they have started, so we must believe that going forward, every African will carry what is an African passport, which will allow them to move, as you contemplated, from Dakar in Senegal to Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, from Cape Town in South Africa to Cairo in Egypt, and that they'll be able to move without free let and hindrance. The Osagyefo, we remember you. But we also remind ourselves that when we talk about unity, we are not saying that we should strike down our traditional institutions. We are simply saying that our traditional institution must be integrated in our modern scheme of doing things. And I must tell you that today here we are agreeing with Ali Mazrui that indeed what others think is the Tower of Babel can be a Power of Babel, and that this continent can be united, and our diversity would be a cultural and linguistic mosaic, which would be our strength and the attraction to other parts of the world. Osagyefo, as I continue to speak to you in your grave, there is the tendency that I may speak until the cows come home, but what is the wisdom in doing that? You are so clear in 1963, that is your clarity that we must use to remind ourselves that Africa can rise. But as I posed a little early, for whom is it rising? Is it rising for the Indians? Is it rising for the Lebanese? Is it rising for the Chinese? Is it rising for the Americans, or is it rising for the whole world, with Africa as the bearers of the weight for our benefit? We want to live in a continent where we are respected, but we know that it's only through unity, and we believe that the academics will carry their weight so that our education has its value. Those of us who are trained in the sciences will no longer allow their knowledge to sit in libraries, but that knowledge will be utilized by the political class for the sake of the transformation of the lives of the people. We hope that our unity will create an environment where our young men and women will not be humiliated at the embassies of Australia, Canada, the United States of America, and little European countries, that they may acquire their passports as a way of escaping from Africa, which provides no opportunity and no hope for our young men and women. We can do it. We must do it, because if we don't do it, we ourselves will be done. So Africa must rise, because if Africa does not rise, Africa will perish. Thank you, and God bless you.